He was running that night with all his strength, crashing through the dark forest, his breath loud and broken. Behind him, his old father, 79 years old, was chasing him. But this was no ordinary chase. The old man was faster than he should have been, his staff pounding the ground like thunder, his shadow stretching unnaturally long under the moonlight. No one should run that fast at his age. No one should have eyes that glowed like that in the dark. And that was when I realized the man everyone hated in our village was not just an old man. He was something else. My name is Adarank. I'm 27 years old, born and raised in a small Yoruba village in Osun State. If you have ever lived in a place where everyone knows everyone, you'll understand when I say our village was like one big family, but with secrets. We had farms, we had festivals, we had church on Sundays and mosque on Fridays. Life looked normal. But if you lived long enough, you would hear the whispers. And the whispers were always about Baba Alagbid. That was not his real name. His real name was Alao, a 79-year-old man who lived at the far edge of the village, close to the thick forest. But nobody called him Alao. They called him Baba Alagbid, the blacksmith, because in his younger days he made charms, iron tools, and strange objects nobody dared to question. He had a son, Bayo, who was 24, tall, quiet, and very polite. Unlike his father, people liked Bayo. He kept to himself and was often seen helping his friends at the farm or playing AO under the mango tree with boys his age. But no matter how kind Bayo was, he could never escape the shadow of his father. And his father's shadow was long. I had grown up hearing the same stories as everyone else. Don't walk near Baba's house at night. If you look into his eyes for too long, you will fall sick. He eats food alone because no one knows what he mixes it with. The villagers despised him. He never joined in festivals, he never came to the church or mosque, and he was always seen walking slowly with his long wooden staff, muttering things under his breath. But here is the strange part, nothing bad ever happened to our village. While other nearby villages complained of armed robbers, kidnappers, strange sicknesses, even attacks by wild animals, our own village always seemed untouched. No one connected it at first. Or they did and just didn't want to admit it. But the truth started to show itself the year I turned 27. It began with the goats. One hot evening, I was coming back from the stream with my younger cousin when we heard screams near the village square. People were shouting that someone had killed 2 goats, tearing them apart in a way no one had seen before. We ran there, and my stomach turned. The goats were not just killed. They were shredded, their insides spilled like someone had ripped them open with bare hands. People started murmuring. This is not ordinary. Maybe it's thieves. No thief will waste time like this. This is evil. And then, as if it were rehearsed, all eyes turned slowly toward the forest edge. Toward Baba Alagbid's house. That was the first time I felt it, that mix of fear and suspicion in the air. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking of the goats. I kept hearing flies buzzing around their bodies. And then, just when my eyelids were closing, I heard it. A faint knock. I froze. It came again. Slow. Heavy. Like someone tapping wood against the door. I gathered courage and whispered, "Who is there?" There was no answer. Just silence. The next morning, when I went outside, I saw something that shook me. On the ground, near my door, was a mark. A circle drawn in ash, with 3 small stones inside it. I didn't understand it. But I knew one thing, only Baba Alagbid made strange marks like that. And I knew my life was about to change. After the goat incident, the village changed. People no longer sat outside their houses at night to gist. The air felt heavy, like something was waiting. And every time people gathered, the whispers came back. Maybe Baba Alagbid has finally shown his true self. He warned us not to disturb the forest. This is punishment. Should we drive him away? The old man walked past them every day with his crooked staff, his tired back bent but his step strangely strong. Nobody dared to say these things to his face, but the hatred was thick. I used to think villagers exaggerated, but even I started to feel uneasy whenever I saw him. He would glance at you, and it was like his eyes carried too much weight, like they had seen things no human should. One afternoon, I was washing cassava behind my house when I saw Bayo. He greeted me politely and helped me carry one of the basins inside. Bayo was not like his father. He was calm, respectful, and quick to smile. But that day his face looked restless. His eyes kept shifting as if he didn't want to be seen. I asked, "What is it?" He hesitated, then said, "Strange things will happen soon. Stay close to your people at night." Before I could ask what he meant, he was already walking away, his shoulders tense. That night, my thoughts refused to let me sleep. What did he mean by strange things? It didn't take long for the fear to grow worse. 2 children went missing at dusk. We searched the whole village, shouting their names, carrying lanterns that made our shadows dance across the mud walls. The children were found just before midnight, asleep under a tree at the edge of the forest. But here is the strange part, they swore they didn't walk there. The smaller one, barely 6 years old, kept saying, "An old man carried us. He said we should rest." You can imagine what that did to the villagers. The next morning, a group of men gathered at the square. Their voices were loud, their words sharper than cutlass. "This man has brought curses to us. Before, it was goats. Now it's children. If we don't act, something worse will come." I stood at the edge, listening. My chest felt heavy. Because even though no one called his name, everyone knew who they meant. 2 nights later, it happened. I was coming back from a neighbor's house late in the evening. The moon was bright, but the road was quiet. Too quiet. As I passed the narrow path near the forest, I heard a sound. A low, deep humming. Not a song. Not words. Just a sound that seemed to make the air vibrate. I slowed down. My ears strained. And then I saw him. Baba Alagbid was standing there, in the middle of the path, facing the trees. His back to me. His staff pressed into the soil. His body stiff like a statue. The sound was coming from him. I don't know what held me there, but I couldn't move. My legs felt heavy. The humming grew louder, like the ground itself was answering him. Suddenly, he stopped. Slowly, he turned his head toward me. His eyes caught the moonlight. They didn't look like an old man's eyes. They were bright, sharp, like burning coal. My throat went dry. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Then, without a word, he turned back to the forest and walked into the trees, the shadows swallowing him. I ran home like my life depended on it. The next morning, I didn't tell anyone what I saw. Who would believe me? Or worse, what if they believed me? But I noticed something strange. For the first time in years, the villagers said they heard gunshots in the distance at night. Armed robbers had attacked a nearby village, but not ours. Again. And when they said this, I couldn't stop thinking about Baba Alagbid standing in the forest, humming in the dark. Later that week, I saw Bayo again. His face looked tired, his eyes red like he hadn't slept. He asked me quietly, "Did you see my father that night?" I froze. "What do you mean?" He looked at me, searching my face for an answer. Then he said, in a whisper, "If you saw him, don't tell anyone. They won't understand." He walked away before I could stop him. That was when I began to feel it deeply. Whatever his father was doing, Bayo knew. And that knowledge was a burden he carried alone. That week, goats stopped crying at night. Chickens stopped crowing at the wrong hours. Even the crickets seemed quieter. It was like the village was holding its breath, waiting. It began with the dogs. Every dog in the village started barking at once. It was not the usual playful barking. This was wild, desperate, like they were warning us of something we could not see. The sound carried through the night, sharp and endless. People came out of their huts holding lanterns, whispering, looking around. Then we heard the first scream. It came from the northern edge of the village, near the farmland. A man's voice, high and broken. Before anyone could move, another scream followed. Then another. Soon the air was filled with shouting and the sound of running feet. "Thieves!" someone shouted. "Run!" another voice cried. The night turned into chaos. Mothers grabbed their children. Men picked up cutlasses. People slammed their doors shut, their lamps trembling in their hands. I was standing with my cousin outside our hut when we saw shadows moving fast across the farmland. More than 10 men. Or more. Their voices were harsh, speaking in a language I didn't know. Some carried long guns. Others had machetes that cut the moonlight. Armed robbers. For years, we had heard of villages nearby being attacked. They would kill men, take women, burn houses. We always said, thank God it's not us. But that night, it was us. My heart pounded so hard I felt sick. My cousin pulled me toward the door, but my legs froze. I could not believe this was happening. The men were moving closer, shouting, firing shots into the air. Villagers were screaming, running in all directions. Then, suddenly, the air changed. From the corner of my eye, I saw him. Baba Alagbid. He was walking slowly into the square, his staff in his hand. But his steps didn't match the chaos around him. He was calm, too calm. I remember thinking, how can an old man walk into danger like this? The robbers noticed him. One of them laughed, shouting something at him, waving his gun. The others joined, mocking him. But the old man didn't stop. He lifted his staff and pressed it into the ground. And then, something strange happened. The dogs went silent. All of them. In one breath, like someone had pressed their throats shut. The crickets stopped too. The whole night became heavy, too heavy. The robbers stopped laughing. They looked around, confused. That was when the humming began. It was the same sound I had heard that night near the forest. A low, deep vibration that made the ground shiver. This time, it was louder. Stronger. It carried through the air like waves. The robbers shouted at him, but their voices cracked. One of them fired his gun into the air, but the shot sounded weak, like it had been swallowed. The old man's eyes glowed again. Brighter than the lanterns. He raised his staff, and for a second, the shadows around him moved like living things. They stretched, long and sharp, crawling across the ground toward the robbers. The men panicked. They began to shoot wildly, but their bullets seemed to vanish into the dark. One dropped his gun and ran. Another tripped and screamed as the shadows wrapped around his legs like ropes. The humming grew louder, shaking the air. People were hiding in their houses, peeking through cracks, watching in terror. Nobody moved to help. Nobody even breathed too loudly. I was frozen. My eyes wide, my chest tight. I couldn't look away. The robbers finally broke. One by one, they turned and fled into the night, their footsteps pounding the earth. Their shouts faded into the distance until only silence remained. Silence, and the old man. He lowered his staff, and the humming stopped. The shadows melted back into the night like they were never there. For a moment, the square was empty. The air felt cold, even though the night was warm. Then, slowly, doors began to open. People stepped out, their faces pale, their bodies trembling. Nobody said a word. Nobody thanked him. Nobody clapped. They just stared. And in that silence, Baba Alagbid turned and walked back toward the forest, as if nothing had happened. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying what I saw. The robbers should have killed us. We had no real weapons, no strong defense. But something had stopped them. Something not human. And that something was Baba Alagbid. The next morning, the village was buzzing. Some people said it was God that saved us. Others said the robbers were drunk and scared themselves away. But I knew the truth. I saw it. And I could tell from Bayo's tired face that he knew I had seen it too. When our eyes met across the square, he gave me the smallest shake of his head, as if warning me not to speak. But the whispers grew louder. Did you see how he stood there? The robbers ran like children. Maybe he called something to chase them away. Fear and suspicion turned into something sharper. And for the first time, I realized the villagers didn't only despise him. They were afraid of him. Truly afraid. The morning after the attack, the village was restless. People moved around in groups, speaking in deep tones, their faces hard. Nobody wanted to say it too loud, but the thought was on every lip. We cannot live with him here anymore. At first, I thought it was just gossip. But by evening, the men gathered again at the square, this time with anger thick in their voices. One man shouted, "You all saw it. An old man cannot stand against guns unless he is using evil power." Another added, "If he can chase away robbers, then he can also turn on us one day. He has trapped us all. Our lives are in his hand." The crowd murmured, nodding. Fear had turned into rage. I stood at the edge again, listening. My stomach knotted. Because even though I was afraid of him too, I knew that without him, last night would have ended in blood. But nobody cared about that. They only saw danger in his shadow. That night, I couldn't sit still. I went outside and found Bayo sitting on a wooden bench near his hut. His face looked older, as if the last few days had added years to him. I asked quietly, "Did you hear what they are saying?" He gave a bitter laugh. "I hear everything. They want him gone. What will you do?" He looked at me with tired eyes. "What can I do? He is my father. But he is not like other fathers." There was silence. Then he said something that showed me. "You think they hate him? But if they force him to leave, then you will know real fear." His voice was low, steady. No anger, no threat. Just certainty. And it stayed with me the whole night. The next day, the decision was made. The chief called a meeting. Everyone gathered under the big iroko tree. The air was tense, hot with anger and fear. The chief, an old man himself, raised his hand and spoke slowly. "My people, what happened last night is not ordinary. We must decide if we will keep this man in our midst or send him away." Voices rose instantly. "Send him away. He is a curse. If he can fight robbers like that, then he is not human." A few voices tried to argue. One woman shouted, "He saved us. Do you want to die without him?" But she was drowned by louder voices. "We would rather die than live under a man using darkness." I watched Bayo. He stood stiffly beside his father, his jaw tight, his fist clenched. His father just leaned on his staff, silent, his face unreadable. Finally, the chief said, "We will speak with him tonight. He must leave this village." The crowd cheered. Not with joy, but with relief. And I knew something terrible was about to happen. That evening, the chief and a group of elders walked toward Baba Alagbid's hut. I followed quietly at a distance, hiding in the shadows. The village was strangely silent, everyone waiting, holding their breath. When they reached his hut, the chief called out, "Baba, come out. We want to speak with you." For a long moment, there was no sound. Then the door creaked open, and the old man stepped out, leaning on his staff. The chief cleared his throat. "We are grateful for the years you have lived among us. But what happened last night shows us that your ways are not our ways. You must leave this village tonight." The words hung in the air like smoke. The old man looked at them, his eyes sharp. His voice, when he spoke, was low but clear. "If I leave, this village will not last 3 nights." The elders shifted uneasily. One of them spat on the ground. "Threats. We will not be afraid of your words." But the chief stood firm. "You must go." Bayo stepped forward, his voice shaking with anger. "You don't know what you are asking for. You think he is your enemy, but he is the wall standing between you and death." The chief's voice hardened. "Then let death come. At least it will come clean, not from the hand of one man hiding behind darkness." The old man's face tightened. For the first time, I saw something in his eyes, not anger, but sadness. He raised his staff slowly, pressed it to the ground, and said, "So be it." He turned and walked back inside. The elders left, their shoulders stiff, their faces pale but proud. And that night, the village was quieter than it had ever been. Too quiet. The next morning, Baba Alagbid's hut was empty. He was gone. No one saw him leave, not even Bayo. His staff was missing too. The villagers rejoiced. Some danced, some prayed, some slaughtered chickens in thanksgiving. But deep in my chest, I felt no joy. Only dread. Because his last words would not leave my mind. "This village will not last 3 nights." And he was right. On the second night, it began. The first night after Baba left was calm. Too calm. People slept like they had finally been freed from a curse. The second night was not the same. It started with the smell. A strange, rotten smell that drifted through the air long before dawn. People woke up coughing, covering their noses, peering out of their huts. The smell came from the forest, thick and choking, like dead things piled high. By evening, the animals began to scream. Goats ran wildly in circles, chickens crashed against their cages, even dogs whimpered and clawed at the ground as if trying to dig their way out. Then came the drums. No one was beating them, not any human hand. But from deep inside the forest, a heavy thump, thump, thump echoed like the heartbeat of something too large to name. The villagers gathered, trembling. Children cried. Women clutched their wrappers tight. Men held cutlasses but their hands shook. And then it came. From the shadows of the forest, figures began to appear. Not men. Not animals. Something in between. Their shapes bent wrong, their eyes empty, their mouths wide and dripping with sounds that weren't words. There were many of them. Too many. The air grew hot. The sky seemed darker though the moon was full. People screamed. Some tried to run, but the creatures were faster. They moved like smoke, like fire, tearing into huts, dragging people away. The sound of gunshots cracked, but bullets passed through them like air. Our village became a pit of screams. I ran with my cousin, but everywhere I turned there was chaos. Men shouting, women falling, children vanishing into the dark. My legs gave way, and I dropped to the ground, covering my ears, shaking. And in that moment, I remembered Baba's words. This village will not last 3 nights. He had not lied. By dawn, half the village was gone. Burned huts, blood on the ground, silence where there used to be laughter. Those of us who survived gathered in the square, broken. Eyes swollen from tears, bodies trembling with fear. And there, standing in the middle, was Bayo. His face was hard, his jaw set. He looked older than his 24 years. "This," he said, his voice shaking, "is what my father held back all these years. He carried the weight of this village alone while you spat on him. You hated him. You mocked him. But he was the wall that kept these things out." No one could answer. Heads hung low. Shame mixed with fear. The chief, weak and pale, whispered, "We did not know." Bayo's voice rose, raw with anger and grief. "You did not want to know. You chose to believe lies because the truth was too heavy. Now see the truth with your own eyes." Later that day, they found Baba's staff lying at the edge of the forest. Splintered, broken. He was gone. Some said the creatures had taken him. Others said he had given himself up, sealing them away to buy us one last chance to breathe. But none of us saw him again. It was only then the villagers realized the truth. For decades, Baba Alagbid had carried the darkness so the village could live in the light. He used his power that could have destroyed us, to protect us instead. He bore the hatred of his own people without complaint. And when they drove him away, the shield broke. We had cursed our own protector. Do not despise what you do not understand. Fear makes people blind. The villagers refused to see the truth about Baba because it frightened them. And their blindness destroyed them. Evil is not always where you point your finger. The villagers believed Baba was the source of their problems. In reality, he was the reason they had no problems for so long. Ungratefulness has a cost. When people reject the hand that protects them, they open the door to destruction. The safety they enjoyed was not luck, it was sacrifice. Days later, as the survivors buried their dead, I saw Bayo standing alone at the forest edge. His eyes were red, but his voice was steady when he spoke to me. "They think it is finished," he said. "But I know it is not. My father is not truly gone. He has only crossed into the shadows he controlled. One day, when this village has learned its lesson, I will bring him back." His hand tightened on the broken staff. "Until then, I will stand where he stood. I will hold the wall. Even if I must carry the same hatred he carried." He turned and walked into the dawn, his shadow stretching long behind him. And for the first time since that night, I felt a flicker of something I had not felt in days.